everyone, and welcome to Growing Up with Ro, Going Beyond It, a Young People's Roundtable. I am Kenyetta Whitfield. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the communications manager here at URGE. I'm super excited to have everyone here. We really appreciate it, and we hope that you really enjoy the conversation we're going to have today. So I just wanted to start by giving a little background. As many of you probably know, Ro is turning 49 this weekend, right? But despite that, we are waiting for a decision on the Jackson Women's Health Organization case, anxiously awaiting actually, a case that could really redefine Ro and what abortion access looks like in the United States. And so on the heels of that, we decided that we wanted to have a conversation where young people could talk about their vision and their thoughts on abortion access and reproductive justice in a world where we have real abortion access and we are getting closer to achieving reproductive justice. So I have a couple notes to go over. First, you should be able to turn on captions, live captions for this event. We've turned those on. So please, if you need those, feel free to turn them on. And if you're having issues with those, please put that in the chat and we'll try to make sure that we get that all situated. Second, as you can probably see, this event will be recorded. It's currently being recorded. So just letting you know that. And third, this is a Q&A style event, and we want to incorporate some of your questions if you have any. So please put them into the chat box. I will be collecting them and giving them to the moderators after we finish the pre-written question section. All right, and we have two lovely moderators for our event today. I want to introduce you all to them. Our first moderator is Cindy Cruz. Cindy uses she, her, and aya pronouns and is the Western States Program Director here at URGE. As the Western States Program Director, she oversees programming, policy, and organizing work in California and Texas. She's a passionate advocate for reproductive justice, racial justice, and LGBTQ+ rights. Cindy serves on the board of directors for California Latinas for Reproductive Justice and on the Just Community Central Coast Board. She is a certified health education specialist and received a BS in public health education and a master's of public health from California State University, Northridge. And our second wonderful moderator is Desiree Lucky. Desiree uses she, her pronouns and is the Director of Policy here at URGE. Before joining URGE, she worked at national LGBTQ+ and gender justice organizations. As a Midwesterner, her commitment to reproductive justice stems from her own experiences growing up in downstate Illinois, and she's thrilled to work with young people who come from communities like herself. She's currently a student at St. Philip's College pursuing a culinary arts degree, as well as a proud graduate of Georgetown Law Center and Howard University, and she's a member of the Maryland Bar. And with that, I will pass off to Cindy to introduce some of our wonderful panelists.
Thank you, Kiki. Welcome, everyone. So excited to be here with you all. So I'm going to introduce some of our wonderful panelists. I'm going to start with Z Zenobia. Z is currently a candidate for a master's in fisheries biology at Humboldt State University. They graduated from Humboldt State summa cum laude with a Bachelor of Science in Fisheries Biology and a minor in Women's Studies and Scientific Scuba Diving. Z has worked to try and make the fisheries biology department more inclusive as a trans and non-binary student. They have been serving as the Humboldt State representative on the Pro-Abortion Student Advisory Board and are working to spread awareness of medication abortion across the campus. Welcome, Z. We also have Ursula Justice. Ursula is one of the University of Alabama Huntsville chapter leaders and also a clinic escort in Huntsville. They are also a parent and Air Force veteran. Welcome, Ursula. and Delaney Jones. Delaney is a junior and an Emory Lindquist Honors Scholar at Wichita State University. Delaney is an executive chair member of FOCUS, which stands for Feminist on Campus Uniting Students, a Planned Parenthood volunteer, and a public speaker and advocate. She's a small town Kansas native who is passionate about ensuring and protecting access to safe, effective reproductive health care for Kansans and Americans alike. Welcome, Delaney. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to my colleague, Desiree, to introduce the rest of our panelists.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have the privilege of introducing Maria Renteria, who uses she, they pronouns. Maria is from Columbus, Ohio. She graduated from Shawnee State University with a degree in biology, minoring in women's studies, and currently works in regulatory. Maria is also a former Urge Ohio canvasser for their Divest Invest campaign. She is so honored to be here today, representing Ohio, a state where abortion access is constantly being threatened. I also have the privilege to introduce Jordan Barrant. Jordan is a graduating senior comparative women's studies major and curatorial studies minor at Spelman College. Currently, she is the Spelman Urge chapter president and is particularly interested in queer intersections and reproductive justice work. Further, she is extremely interested in sex ed work and integrating art into that practice. Thank you both for joining us today.
Sorry, everyone. I have a hard time finding my mute button sometimes. Okay, thank you, Desiree. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off with our first question. And our first question is for everyone on the panel. So to get us started, let's start with being honest, right? When you all hear the words Roe v. Wade, what do you really feel? And do you feel anything at all?
I can go ahead and kick us off, break the silence a little bit. So when I hear Roe v. Wade, especially with being in Ohio, and it's a lot of frustration, and I guess not really understanding the nation's response to this revolutionary bill, court case. So just a lot of frustration and whatnot.
I'll go ahead and take the mic next. When I think of Roe, personally, I feel very vulnerable. I feel very underprotected, and I have a lot of anxieties as well about what the future of my daughter's abortion options are going to be. Being in Alabama, I have a lot of the same day-to-day concerns as anyone in Ohio would. It's a very unpopular subject down here, and daily anxieties of, is tomorrow going to be the day that I don't have a say in my repro care anymore?
I can go next. Totally agree with what you, Ursula and Maria, just said. And I also like to say that I think I feel like my body is under attack. I think the entire case is a reminder that as birth givers, as people who need abortions or may need abortion, trials and legislation like that are always subjected to us. And so I think when I hear Roe v. Wade, I just am reminded that my body is not my choice, and that there's always legislation that can be erased or resurrected that somehow impacts my ability to have access to healthcare.
Whenever I hear Roe v. Wade, I definitely have mixed feelings. It definitely was a court case that happened quite a while before I was born. And so I feel like there's some kind of disconnect for me, that it's important to my reproductive justice now. And it's very powerful, obviously. in further legislation, but at the same time, it feels like a landmark that was quite a while ago, and there hasn't been something quite as powerful since.
I'd like to echo that, Delaney. I think the lack of protection for women and trans and non-binary people, especially in reproductive health and in reproductive justice, speaks to the status of how marginalized we are within this community, within this nation. And it's really despairing sometimes to feel, okay, this was almost 50 years ago and we're still fighting for it. It's still being attacked. And we don't have rights beyond this. We haven't progressed.
Thank you all so much for sharing those responses, just really powerful reflections on Roe. For folks on our call today who might not be as familiar with Roe, because as mentioned, it did happen quite some time ago now, we're coming up on the 49th anniversary. In 1973, Roe versus Wade established that the Constitution of the United States protects a pregnant person's right to choose to have an abortion without excessive government interest. So this question is for Maria and for Jordan. Despite being a landmark decision, research shows that many young people are unsure about what Roe versus Wade specifically establishes. Why do you think that is? And do you think that the way most politicians approach discussion to abortion contributes to this issue?
I can go first. Yeah, I think that many states are intentionally confusing. I think that, I mean, I'm based in Georgia, but legislation depends on where you are, whether you're in Georgia, whether you're in Texas. I'm from Boston, and so it's a whole different set of legislation there. So I think that young people want to get involved, but I think they can struggle to know where to find their footing, especially if they're a college student and they're going to a different state and it's a completely different set of rules there. And I also think conversations around like Roe v. Wade and around different abortion conversations, it tends to just be either pro-abortion or anti-abortion, and that doesn't really give people a great way to engage in the conversation or join the conversation. So yeah, I just think a lot of the discussions around it are meant to confuse not just young people, but anyone interested in getting an abortion or getting involved in abortion access.
I absolutely agree. I think I would also just like to add that it's not very widely talked about in general. I do remember in high school, I was actually grounded for posting something pro-abortion on the internet. So definitely seen as like a very like taboo subject, especially by those who are of older generations than us. And then as far as like the administration, Biden has not yet said abortion as an acting president. I don't believe Obama ever said the word abortion. So it's just kind of like talked around. And it's really detrimental to the, I guess, legacy.
Thank you both for those reflections. My next question is for Delaney. So Delaney, recently Kansas legislators voted to overturn a state Supreme Court decision that declared abortion a fundamental right in the state constitution. And now Kansas will vote to decide whether to keep abortion a fundamental right. What would you say to someone who believes that young people don't care enough about this issue to vote on it?
I would probably say that it's not that young people don't care, it's just simply that they don't know. I didn't grow up around any kind of reproductive information. We have very limited sexual education, and growing up, at least where I did in the Bible Belt, abortion was a dirty word, and we did not say that. And so for me, I didn't really know about a lot of reproductive information and access until I sought it out myself. And thankfully, I did not get any repercussions for that, and my family was supportive. But as Maria said, that was not the same situation for them. And I think if we provided a platform that could both inform and educate in a safe way, where people can both express themselves and learn and encourage young people to learn, we wouldn't have an issue with young people not voting. So to them, I would say it's not that young people don't care. I think they would care. They just don't know about it, and they're just not informed and don't have the resources to be informed.
Thank you so much for that, Delaney. And just speaking about what young people care about, while URGE is proudly abortion positive, we are far from a single issue organization. Even if abortion becomes affordable and accessible for all, there are still other issues that prevent us from achieving reproductive justice and hinder the ability for young queer people of color, low-income folks, and many other marginalized people to decide what their families and their communities look like. Aside from abortion access, what reproductive justice issues do you think need the greatest prioritization? And I'd love to go ahead and start with Z, but also have Ursula and Maria answer this question.
Yeah, I think in a very broad sense, housing, food access, student loan forgiveness, these are things, these are fundamental needs that we have as individuals, as humans, and a lot of us are not being met. We don't have homes for a lot of our houseless neighbors. We don't have food for a lot of kids in schools. We don't have food for a lot of adults in college. Like, there is a very distinct separation of folks who have access to healthy food and education and money for medicine and insurance, and those who don't. And I don't think we can achieve reproductive justice without incorporating all of those people who are not, whose needs are not being met right now.
So to echo some of Z's concerns, I'm a parent myself, and I have had 2 abortions. I'm very fortunate that neither of my abortions came with any sort of being unsure. I knew that is what I wanted, but I've had a lot of friends who had abortions because they knew that they wouldn't be able to afford to feed their kids. They knew that they wouldn't be able to afford to have them in childcare. And so echoing Z, you know, assisting in those issues would help people be able to make choices that they want to make and not necessarily ones they feel that they need to make. Also, a topic that is very important to me is just that there's not enough accessibility and places where trans people are able to go to access reproductive care. I'm in Alabama, and surprisingly, we have an organization called Thrive, which is very LGBT plus positive. They are awesome about anything that comes in that realm, and just having more places like that throughout the country, I think, is crucial to having fair access for reproductive justice.
I would also like to just echo everything that has been said already. I think on top of that, kind of building on what Z said, I think fair pay is a very important aspect that we need to focus on. Pregnant folks, trans and non-binary people should have the opportunity, the ability to choose when they want to parent a child, and they should have the means to. On top of that, especially with being from Ohio, especially with being from Columbus, Ohio, the bad policing across our nation. I know Columbus is not the only place that is affected by that. CPD in particular is extremely violent. They're extremely overfunded. For example, the 2021 budget was $377 million. 153 million of that went towards police patrol. whatever that means. And the 22 budget is proposed to be at least 1 billion. So on top of that, there's also like climate change that we should probably be worried about. And all of these things are really impactful in the sense of people don't want to bring children into this world if they know that they're going to be met with violence or they're not going to have a stable, planet to live on.
Thank you all for that. Such great points that you all just made. I am going to direct my next question to Jordan, Z, and Delaney, and we can go in that order. So we know that the South, the Midwest, and rural communities are often overlooked in progressive movements, especially the most marginalized communities that live there. As people who are living in these areas, could you discuss why reproductive justice and real abortion access cannot be achieved without your communities?
Yeah, thank you. And this is a really important question. I think that reproductive justice is the South. I think that the South has pushed reproductive justice forward. I wanted to talk about Sister Song, who coined the name Reproductive Justice in 1997. It's an organization based in Atlanta that is founded by Black women and works to support the Black and brown communities in Georgia, but they coined reproductive justice as the human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, have children, not have children, and parent the children we have in safe and sustainable communities. And I also am thinking about places like Mississippi that are fighting for their only abortion provider. And I think about, like I said, I'm from Boston, places like that, a lot of liberal, more northern, progressive cities are able to kind of get away with not pushing reproductive justice as forward as they could because they uplift white, cis, upper middle class to wealthy white women and don't center Black and brown people, queer people, trans people, low-income people, disabled people, any marginalized people really, but are able to claim or say that they are doing more work than they're doing because they center this one privileged group of people. And so I think that the South is really where reproductive justice has moved forward and is pushed forward and has been pushed forward and is where we should really be looking towards for our insights on how to change legislation.
Thank you, Jordan. I'm coming from California. I'm coming from Northern California, about an hour south of the Oregon border. And this area is really, really rural. We can't, as a trans person, I couldn't get healthcare in this area. I had to drive 6 hours away to be able to get healthcare. So as a person who could become pregnant, that can be a huge barrier to any type of life choices. Like you'd have to be able to take full days off of work. You'd have to be able to have a car, have have some level of wealth where you can have those options, those abilities to be able to choose to not be pregnant. And I believe that rural communities have a really unique position where women, non-binary, and trans people are not, like there's not a lot of us, but we all have similar needs. So by working together with our communities, we can create better systems for reproductive justice, more options for rural people to have the same health options as someone who would be in living in a city, like Jordan was saying.
I definitely agree so far with everything that's been said. Super good so far. And just going off of Kansas alone, aside from Wichita and the Kansas portion of Kansas City, there's nothing out here. And coming from a rural city that's not really in Wichita, I've lived it, I grew up in it. And surprisingly, Kansas as a state is very, very progressive. From our stance in the Civil War to the 20th century progressive movement, to even securing abortion rights in our Constitution, in Section 1 of the Kansas Constitution. We've been fairly progressive in comparison to our Midwestern neighbors. And uniquely, while abortion is still protected, fingers crossed, we are a state that allows minors to get abortions with legal consent from their parents or guardians, which a lot of states don't do or are trying to prevent. So I feel like because even though we're rural and all spread out, there's still that power in territory, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, there's only maybe 1,300 in this city or 12,000 in this city, but all of them matter. And when you put it all together, all of us make one big city, and we all have very similar shared progressive beliefs.
I'm going to hop in on this one too. I have lived in a lot of different states across the country. I grew up in the military and joined myself. And having lived in Texas and Alabama, the communities down here are incredible. And my local clinic does some of the furthest abortions along in the South. And we have patients that fly in from different states. We have so many organizations on the ground down here. And like it was mentioned earlier, living in the South, you have to fight for it. And that's something that I did not experience living in the North. It's something that you really take for granted. And the Southerners, Cadence, please, one moment, I want to talk, okay? I'm sorry. Being down in the South, Cadence, baby.
Quick. Mom, get off the
Cadence, baby.
Somebody's.
I'm so sorry.
Versus in the olden days, people would seriously cut the hair off a pig.
Yes, baby, please go.
Like,
So,
that
wrapping that up, the communities down here are just critical to the nation's abortion and reproductive fight, just because you have to be fighters down here. To be a provider in the South, it's not something that you just, it was available. Like, it is something that they face so much trouble for on a daily, and they're constantly having to fight legal loopholes and everything that's thrown at them. And so it just can't be done without the South.
As someone who is down here in Texas, I wholeheartedly agree with you there. It is definitely a fight down here, but the communities are incredible. I have one last question for you all, and then I'll pass it to Cindy after. And I think all of you have sort of woven this throughout your responses so far. But how do we make sure the voices of those who are most affected by abortion bans are centered in our work? It's a question for anyone, so anyone can go ahead and get us started.
I could start. I think that centering the most marginalized, meaning Black and brown people, trans people, queer people, low-income people, disabled people, I think it's okay to name them and to say that that they're more marginalized, more oppressed, and to support them. Like when you see their GoFundMes, when you see they're in need of funds, in need of money to get to an abortion, like Z was saying before, it can take people like 12 hours to get to their local abortion clinic. So if they need support in that way, providing tangible resources, and I think like the best way to center them is to quite literally center them.
I definitely second that. I think that sometimes it's assumed that everybody struggles to get abortion access, which a lot of people do, but there are definitely communities that have different, very unique struggles that aren't being addressed. For example, in Kansas, over half of those accessing abortions are white cisgendered women. And although maybe a lot of the population fits that quota, it definitely leaves out different needs for people of color, transgender folks, non-binary folks, disabled people, and so on and so forth. So I definitely agree. Identify who needs that help and get them help.
I think it's so important for people to share their individual struggles. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is, like in Alabama, there's a 72-hour waiting period. If someone has to fly in, they need a hotel, They might need childcare for wherever they are. There's so many hidden expenses that aren't vocalized. And I think that if there was a lot more space for people to be able to vocalize those unique issues, people would realize that this isn't something that you just kind of wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning and decide, you know, like there's so much that goes into it, and there's so much help that is needed for so many marginalized people.
I would like to echo everything that has been said. I wholeheartedly agree. I would also like to add that representation really matters. And seeing people who are part of marginalized groups, disabled people, Black and brown, queer, trans, etc., folks need to be in the forefront of the reproductive justice movement. And that means, you know, hiring Black and brown and Indigenous and, you know, disabled and non-binary and trans folks to work in your movement. And that means giving them the space and paying them for, you know, giving their service, I guess, and just allowing them to proudly like shout their abortion. And because representation really, really does matter.
Thank you, Maria. I want to add on to that. I think we need to see those people. We need to see trans men who are pregnant. We need to see non-binary people who are pregnant. We need to see young people, children that become pregnant. And these are individuals that, again, need to be paid for their effort, for their emotional labor, for having to create an understanding of their identity for other people to respect. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for your responses. I have one last wrap-up question, and then after that, we'll move on to some audience questions. And this one is also for everyone, so feel free to jump in. Is there anything else that you want people to know about how young people feel about abortion access in the US right now? Anything else maybe that we haven't covered yet so far?
I can go ahead. I think one thing that's really important for not just young people to know, but I think just the general population, abortion is not like this big, scary, like traumatizing, you know, awful thing. I know plenty of people who have had abortions who, you know, say that it was one of the greatest like medical experiences that they've had. I got into reproductive justice by means of my close friend Jordan Cruz, and you know she shouts her abortion every day, and she has made it a point to kind of destigmatize everything, you know, that happened with her personal experience. And I really admire that, and I wish that it was talked about more.
I just want to hop on to, you stole the words out of my mouth with that. That is one of the things that motivates me to share my story so much. I am so excited seeing my generation and even the generation below me about how we are really just taking back the word, you know, and making it known that this is not something that we are feeling super shame for. This is not something that we regret. There have been the studies out there, you know, 95% of us, you know, the first feeling 5 years down the road is still relief. We have taken it back, and I just love that so much because it just changes the game. Having my experience as a clinic escort, I see the people who are older than me who come with that generational shame that they were taught as children, and it it's so encouraging seeing other escorts and everything being able to just kind of like wrap their arms around them. And it's like, this is okay. Like, I know that you were told this was something that was dirty and shameful, but it's not. You are getting a medical procedure done. You are making this choice, and I'm proud of you for making it. And I just love that that really is becoming like the main topic, is just shouting your abortion and being confident in your choices for yourself.
I just wanted to add a little bit to what Ursula said, that I absolutely love the terminology generational shame. I'd never heard it put that way before, and I think that's the best way you could have possibly described it, is breaking that constant cycle of feeling bad about something that you don't need to feel bad about. And for young people, both with abortion and reproductive access, as well as like even sexual liberation, there are so many different things being broken that we're not ashamed of anymore. But I just wanted to commend Ursula on using that. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and I agree with what everyone has said. And I'd also add that I think young people are talking about abortions even if they're not using the same language as us. You know, they're complaining about why they have to pay $50 for Plan B and why they have to pay for condoms, and they're upset if they go to get an abortion, they're getting yelled at or things yelled at them. You know, they realize that there is issues around abortions even if they're not saying you know, they're abortion positive necessarily or talking about abortions in the same way that we might be in this conversation here, but that young people care, and they realize that it affects them and it affects their bodies. But like we've talked about in this conversation, so much of the conversations around abortion is so confusing and hard to get into. And I also want to say that, like I was kind of saying earlier, some of the experiences around abortion, because of how America handles abortion, can be extremely traumatic. Like if you are trying to get an abortion, you have to travel and you have to go to a state where you're not going to be supported at the abortion clinic, and you might not have support from your family. And then after your abortion, you know, you don't have any real services afterwards to get the support you might need to kind of recover or recuperate from that. So I also say that young people not only deserve access to abortions, but access to support afterwards. And yeah.
Thank you all for sharing that. I think we're going to go ahead and transition into some of the questions that we got from the audience. So I'll kick it off, and Cindy, if you want to take the one after that. Today is 1 year since Biden was inaugurated, and as many people have mentioned, he has not even mentioned abortion once. Going into the second year of his administration, what are some of the issues you would like the administration to prioritize, and how are they connected to our broader goals of liberation? And that's for anyone who cares to answer it.
I'll hop on. One of the big things that I feel like we've been teased with since he was running in his campaign is free childcare. My daughter is 6 years old, and I have like $65,000 in childcare in her alone already. And a lot of that was while I was active duty, and it was at a significantly lower rate than it would have been otherwise. And it hurts me seeing other people being in less privileged situations, just not being able to go to work because they can't afford the children they have. And that just has trickle effects down their entire lives and then into their children's lives. So I would really love to see like real action done on that. And also, I want an executive order protecting abortion access, because Roe v. Wade, as we've said before, is making me nervous. And I, you know, even if it does go through court situation afterwards, I just want to see him boldly claim protections that we were teased with, I feel like.
I definitely second all of that. And kudos to whoever asked that question. It's super loaded and super good. I love it. But something I would like to see on the small scale, because an executive order would be amazing, is even just him and his administration addressing abortion to begin with. Of course, politicians make a bunch of promises that they don't fulfill. That's kind of their thing, but we don't have to settle for it. And even if it's just something as small as advocating for pro-abortion groups, or even discussing things like the bill in Texas. Just talking about that on the platform that he has would make such a difference.
I think we've seen a lot of complications, obviously, with the pandemic and how the pandemic has impacted healthcare, especially for disabled folks, especially for pregnant people. And I think that the administration should really obviously take more time, be more clear, put more money into conveying to people that disabled people's lives matter and that they need to be careful. They need to have some sense of community for us to continue existing together. I don't think we can move very far beyond this if we don't prioritize those things, especially now as things are continuing to get worse, as more and more people are continuing to die. And we're just kind of like getting desensitized to it as we are to people who die from heart attacks or people who die from car crashes. It's just another thing that happens now.
I feel as though healthcare as a whole is something that needs to be very openly discussed by the administration, whether it's free healthcare or more affordable healthcare. There are ways that we can go about this, and for example, not putting billions of dollars into the military every single year. And I think with access to better healthcare, better quality, more like readily available healthcare, we can tackle a lot of issues that come with liberation, whether it be abortion access or even just getting, like Z said, getting care as a disabled person or getting care for as a trans person. So healthcare should definitely be a big priority.
Yeah, this question, like Delaney said, is so loaded. There's so many things I thought of. I was like struggling to think of one, but what Maria said about healthcare reminded me of violence and maternal mortality as well. And generally thinking like, not only, I mean, this kind of also goes into the next question, but even without abortions, Black women specifically, Indigenous women specifically, are not safe in hospitals and are not safe to get the medical care that they need. And particularly when it comes to pregnancies, when it comes to giving birth, they don't have the resources they need and the support they need to safely give birth. And so to not only be coming for abortion access, but also not giving any support while you're giving birth, there's really just no options for you. But yeah, I'd say that, but also echoing what everyone else said and a million other things I would love for Biden to support.
Thank you, everyone. Such great answers to that very loaded question, as you all said. Okay, so the next question we have from our audience is, what would it mean for you and people from your state if Roe is overturned? And this is for everybody, so whoever wants to answer. I know y'all are in different states, so I'm looking forward to your responses.
I'll just jump in from California real quick. I think in California, we know and are beginning to prepare for serving folks out of state with abortions, not just as is being done currently, but much broader in a sense of finding a way to pay someone to be able to get a plane ticket to come to California, have an abortion, and go home. I think that's really where California needs to and should be headed, no matter what, if Roe is overturned or not.
I'll hop in next. Try not to get emotional about this because so many people, try to force this abortion shame, and that's what causes all this anxiety. But my anxiety from my last abortion came from the fact that it happened a few days after Roe protected my state from putting forth into law a rule that would have made me a criminal for getting my abortion. And so the idea of not having Roe, my state here in Alabama, we'd be screwed. We really would. We would have to leave the state, which gives me anxiety because Georgia did not need to encourage other states in the South. Georgia tried to push forth a law where you couldn't leave the state and come back without being a criminal for getting that abortion. So especially for us down in the South and Ohio, which is the South of the North, it's just terrifying because I've been in a situation where I was days away from having to use my privilege to be able to just go to another state because I have the funds. Like I would have gone to Canada. I was not continuing that pregnancy, but not everyone has that opportunity. And unfortunately, there isn't enough funds to go around the country to help every underprivileged person to be able to get their abortion in another state if they need it.
Yeah, and I can jump in because you mentioned Georgia, which is where I am. Echoing everything you said, it's just terrifying. I think Georgia is a huge state, and it would really disproportionately affect Black and brown people and low-income people in the state and their ability and access. People who can afford to fly somewhere else may be able to, but for everyone else who can't, would be stuck. And so forced to make choices that they didn't want to make and shouldn't have to make. And then I think another problem in Georgia and a lot of other southern states is that when you're surrounded by other states that are also blocking abortions, you have nowhere to go. You have nowhere to fly to, nowhere to safely drive or transport to. And like Ursula also said, they were trying to block your ability to go to another state without being criminalized. So yeah, Georgia's really been taking after Texas, and they've been trying to push abortion bans for years. And so, yeah, I think it's just terrifying for any marginalized person in need of abortion in the States.
I can hop in since Ohio was also called out a little bit. I feel like not just in Ohio, but really across the nation, if Roe v. Wade is overturned, it's a matter of life or death. Just being completely candid, I am at the point in my life personally that if I were to become pregnant and I couldn't get an abortion, there's definitely that thought of there's no way I'm going to be able to handle this. My body won't be able to handle this. My brain won't be able to handle this. It's a matter of life and death. And so now is really the time to fight for our rights, the right to control our own bodies, our bodily autonomy, and protect the women, trans, and non-binary people who would be affected by this.
I'm also going to jump in real quick. As far as Roe v. Wade being overturned in Kansas, it is not just a possibility, there's a great likelihood, unfortunately. There's a vote coming in, or people are going to be able to vote in August of this year to determine if abortion, 1, is still protected in Kansas, and 2, if not, it'll get rid of all rights to abortion access after 6 weeks, including cases of rape, incest, or the mother's life in danger. And because the vote is so soon and there's not a lot of information about it, it's definitely a risk. And for me, and I'd hope for all my fellow Kansans, that doesn't happen. It's going to be absolute chaos. Kansas was one of the states when Texas passed SB 8 that people came to get abortions, and over a third of the abortions performed in Kansas are from out-of-state residents. So not only would it affect everybody who lives in Kansas, it would also affect all of our neighbors who were traveling here just to get abortion access, those who could. And now they'll either have to go even further or just not have access at all.
Thank you to everyone for that. And we did have one more question in the chat that I'm going to answer really quickly because I think it's an important one and want to make sure that anyone who's asked this has access to the information. We had someone who asked about what they could do in terms of their ability to access abortion in the state of Texas following SB 8, and as we're awaiting on a decision about Roe. The best resource to check out right now for like kind of a one-stop shop is needabortion.org. You can get information about where to get an abortion in Texas, abortion funds, all of that. As a person who had an abortion in Texas 2 weeks before SB 8 went into effect, Ursula, what you said about access in Alabama and just how it felt to know you were so close there really resonated. So just wanted to acknowledge that before going into a quick little spiel about what we're doing at URGE on a policy side of things. So we've all heard from young people today from around the country, and we know that none of these issues around abortion access exist in a vacuum. These are concerted attacks on our bodies, our autonomy, our futures, across reproductive rights, economic opportunities, criminal justice, democracy reform, and more. So now we're waiting on this Supreme Court decision, but we know regardless of what comes down, what the abortion landscape looks like for the future is going to be drastically different than what it looks like even today. We're also waiting on the Senate to vote on the Women's Health Protection Act, also known as WIPA, which is a proactive piece of legislation to help protect abortion access. At a state level, we have policy and movement building directors in Alabama, Ohio, and Georgia, who are all monitoring state legislation on our key issues and working in partnership with other organizations across their states to strengthen access to abortion in their states, as well as address so many of the other issues that we touched on today. We're pushing proactive legislation in many of our states as well, trying to fight these bans and restrictions, fighting anti-trans healthcare bans, and encouraging the expansion of the right to vote instead of restrictions, amongst other issues. So in all of our states where we have a legislative session this year, which are all of our states except for Texas, we will be hosting advocacy days over the coming months to connect with elected officials and to build community together and really hold accountable the folks who said that they're going to support us on these issues and take to task those who are trying to restrict us. And I'm going to turn it over to Cindy to share a little bit more about how people can get involved with URGE.
Thank you. Yeah, so to wrap us up, well, Desiree already did that, talking a little bit about what URGE is doing, but I also want on the screen, you'll see the contact information for our organizers. So I know after these conversations and after we heard from our amazing panelists, we really want to get involved, right? And we really want to like take some action. So you can see on the screen the information for our organizers in the different states that URGE is in. So please contact them if you're interested in getting involved further. And also our social media handles, which will be coming up now. You can follow us on social media as well. And I just want to thank our amazing panelists for their time today, for their insights. Y'all are amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. Our comms team for putting this together. Kiki, shout out to you for all the work that you did on this, and to our audience for joining us today. Thank you for being here. Thanks, everyone.